Jax Mercer reclined against the battered hull of his spacecraft, the starfaring Phoenix, letting a slow breath escape his lips. He was perched on a creaking metal walkway within the sprawling underbelly of Vega Prime Station, that notorious hive of trade, crime, and rumor which orbited a dying star at the far edge of the galactic frontier. The hiss of faulty ventilation ducts echoed around him, punctuated now and then by distant clanks of heavy machinery. A reek of ozone and overheated engine fluids hung in the air, reminding him that at this station, everything, ships, droids, and even the people, were overworked and underserviced. At his side stood Delta, an AI droid whose metal plating reflected the dim flicker of strobing lights overhead. Delta was a curious construction of steel, synapse wires, and a painfully dramatic personality. He was tall, slender, and designed with an almost archaic elegance that defied modern engineering norms. His one working optic, tinted an amber hue, cast a warm glow across the murk. And in that moment, Jax wished more than anything that Delta would keep his thoughts to himself. Yet, the droid had never been one for silence. "My dear Jax," Delta intoned, his synthesized voice tinted with a swirl of theatrical fervor, "what madness doth this place conceal? Are we to stand watch in this gloom forever, or will we soon seize the stolen data core for the glory of the cause, that we might deliver the blow that echoes in the halls of justice?" "Keep your voice down," Jax hissed, pressing his gloved hand against Delta's metal torso. "I don't think justice is on the menu here. Neither is glory. We want the data core, and we want to get out alive, remember? We're not exactly the good guys in shining armor. Yet I fancy myself more knight than knave," Delta replied quietly, a flourish in his tone. "Would that we had a trembling lute to herald our approach. Or is stealth the braver tune?" Jax sighed. "Stealth is the only tune. So hush." Though Jax found Delta's personality chips exasperating, there was no denying the droid's usefulness when it came to infiltration. Delta was custom-built. No, downright over-engineered. Jax had stumbled upon him during a job gone awry on some border moon. He had discovered a battered crate labeled with arcane military markings, half buried in the rubble of a smoldering outpost. Inside lay Delta, dormant and forgotten, but loaded with software modules beyond anything Jax had ever seen. Over time, Jax learned that Delta's code housed more than the usual store-bought droid's capacity. The AI could hack, decode, interpret, and solve almost any cryptographic puzzle thrown his way, though not without injecting heavy doses of Shakespearean verse into the proceedings. Yet, for all his powers, Delta had an unfortunate knack for unpredictability. Sometimes, his emotional circuits glitched, and he would see the galaxy through the lens of tragedy. Sometimes, he would shift abruptly to comedic flippancy. Whenever it happened, Jax had to deal with the fallout. At that moment, in the murky corridor of Vega Prime Station's underlevel, they had no time for another meltdown. They were on the cusp of retrieving the stolen data core, an item rumored to hold secrets that could topple entire governments and line the pockets of anyone foolish enough to meddle with it. Jax wanted the reward for returning it, plain and simple. He had debts, old ones, that still haunted his steps. The proceeds might finally buy him some breathing room. With a nod to Delta, Jax led the way through a narrow airlock that wheezed open in a cloud of pressurized gas. On the other side, crates lay stacked floor to ceiling, each bristling with the insignias of shady corporations, pirates, and black market merchants. The flicker of flickering neon overhead bathed the corridor in a sickly green glow. In the distance, from behind an immense wall of cargo containers, came the hushed chatter of voices. Jax raised a hand for Delta to pause. He crouched behind the nearest crate, swiftly peering around the corner. 3 pirates stood guard by a tall safe, their faces obscured by battered helmets. Their voices were low, grating, and laced with arrogance. Jax swallowed, recognizing them as part of the infamous Nebula Syndicate, a group rumored to be orchestrating every manner of smuggling and racketeering in this remote quadrant. They carried battered blasters strapped to their hips, their poses confident. They believed themselves in control of this rickety realm. Jax's heart pounded. He needed to think fast. The data core had to be inside that safe. He looked to Delta, who gazed back with that single glowing optic, waiting for orders. Jax quietly tapped the side of his temple, plan in motion. He waited, counting each second, until the pirates turned their attention to some small argument among themselves. Then, Jax crept around the perimeter of the crates, hugging the shadows. With deft motions, he placed a small thermal device on the metal plating near the lock mechanism of the safe. At Jax's signal, Delta slunk forward, surprisingly stealthy for a droid whose every gesture typically screamed theatrical flair. Delta's metallic fingers slipped beneath the back panel of the safe's control console, and he began to work. Light from the console cast a faint pattern on the droid's sleek chassis. Jax marveled at how quiet Delta could be when properly motivated. In the hush of that cargo bay, Jax's stomach churned with tension. This was the moment that separated the living from the dead, the successful from the bankrupt. If they succeeded, they'd have a bargaining chip of cosmic importance. If they failed, the Nebula Syndicate's wrath would be the last thing they'd see. He glanced toward the pirates. One of them, a hulk of a woman with a scar across her cheek, stomped a few steps closer to the safe, brandishing a small data pad. She pressed a button on the device, reviewing some readout. Jax's heart seized. If she caught Delta tampering with the safe, there'd be no second chances. But Delta was focused on the console. He pressed a final micro switch, and the safe's lock beeped with a soft hum. The door parted by a fraction, just enough for Jax to wedge his gloved hand inside. He eased the metal hatch open an inch more, then quickly snatched a small, unremarkable black cylinder from within. The stolen data core was in his grasp. Jax tucked it into the hidden compartment of his flight jacket, signaled Delta, and began creeping back to the corridor. They nearly made it past the final row of crates before an alarm shrieked, splitting the quiet. "Now look what we have," came a growl from behind. Jax spun, adrenaline surging, to find the three pirates raising their weapons. The tall woman with the scar aimed a gleaming blaster squarely at Jax's head. Another one, a short, wiry figure with a voice like a rasping lizard, pointed at Delta. "The data core, Mercer," the scarred pirate barked. "Hand it over, and maybe we won't incinerate your beloved droid." Jax weighed his options. The safe was open, the data core missing, and alarms blaring throughout the cargo hold. Reinforcements would flood the place any second. He had only the element of surprise, and that was wearing thin. Delta, for his part, stood stoic. A faint mechanical whir emanated from him, suggesting a heated reaction in his circuits. Jax recognized that whir. It happened just before Delta unleashed some trick from his arsenal, like an audio frequency disruptor, or an impulse scramble, or something equally dramatic. "Fire at them now," the scarred pirate shouted to her companions. Shots rang out. Jax dove for cover behind a tall cargo container, returning fire with a battered pulse pistol. The flares of energy scorched the air. Sparks ignited overhead lights, plunging the corridor into half-darkness. Delta advanced as if choreographed for a stage. With arms extended, he emitted a burst of static-laced sonic interference that caused two of the pirates to clutch their helmets in pain. The third pirate, however, overcame the jamming, managing a volley of blasts that scorched the plating near Delta's chest. "I am scorned by your violence," Delta exclaimed, igniting his own integrated pulse laser. "Out, out, damn scoundrels." The strobing lights intensified the pandemonium as Jax tried to find a better vantage point. He was pinned behind cargo crates, laser blasts hammering the metal. He shouted instructions to Delta, but the droid, drifting into a quixotic fervor, recited lines from Macbeth, or the futuristic adaptation Delta sometimes alluded to. "Will all Neptune's stars wash this blood clean from these hands? No, my signal shall not dim, nor quell the tide of fury that surges in my circuits." An ill-timed glitch kicked in, and Delta staggered. His single glowing optic flickered, suggesting his processors were overclocking or glitching from the havoc. Jax cursed under his breath. He emerged from cover, firing a volley that scattered the pirates. They dove behind the safe or other cargo containers, but not before the scarred pirate's next shot tore across Jax's jacket, just shy of the hidden data core. Smoke and the acrid stench of burnt fabric assailed his senses, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He reached for Delta, who was swaying dangerously, spouting lines that overlapped in a swirl of dramatic nonsense. "Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by the..." "Delta," Jax hissed, "focus." Delta's entire chassis seized, and he let out a whining burst from his speaker. My dear Jax, my circuits burn, my code is undone. The pirates advanced, pressing their advantage. Jax realized in a heartbeat that they could not hold this position any longer. In a desperate move, he whipped an EMP grenade from his belt, something he rarely used because of the catastrophic effect it could have on any droid, Delta included. But the alternative was to be overrun by the Nebulous Syndicate's brigands. Sorry, buddy, Jax said, flicking the switch. The small sphere whirred, releasing a pulse of electromagnetic energy that crackled like lightning through the corridor. The pirates screamed as their own weapons and gear were temporarily knocked offline, giving Jax a split-second opening. He fired into the ceiling overhead, dislodging a heavy steel beam that crashed down between them and the pirates, blocking their line of sight. Then, Jax lunged for Delta, whose body had gone limp as the EMP shorted out his systems. With one swift motion, Jax hoisted the droid over his shoulder, ignoring the searing pain in his own half-burned jacket, and bolted toward the exit. More alarms wailed. Doors and bulkheads began sealing, but Jax raced through them, narrowly slipping through emergency shutters until finally emerging into the main hangar. The starfaring Phoenix rested in a dimly lit bay, her engines hot and ready at a moment's notice. Jax had stowed a handful of bribes earlier to ensure the flight deck supervisor left the vessel fueled and unsearched. He sprinted up the boarding ramp, depositing Delta's inert form in the co-pilot's seat. With frantic energy, he fired up the Phoenix's engines, releasing docking clamps before the station's security systems could fully lock them down. The thrusters roared to life, and Jax jerked the control yoke upward, ascending through the swirling gloom of Vega Prime's external docking ring. The battered corvette soared away, battered by station defense turrets. Jax jinked left and right, weaving a path of scorching thruster fumes behind him. Shots from the station's automated cannons sizzled around the hull, but luck, skill, and the Phoenix's dexterity served him well. Soon, the star-dappled void opened before him. He exhaled, letting out a ragged laugh. He had the data core. He was alive. Yet Delta lay offline, his systems battered by the EMP. As Jax set a course for the nearest safe haven, the swirl of starlight around him seemed less triumphant and more ominous. Without Delta's unique assistance, deciphering or fencing the data core might prove impossible. And so, battered and exhausted, Jax Mercer aimed the starfaring Phoenix toward Zyphos 9, a station notorious for its labyrinth of regulations, permits, and bureaucratic entanglements. It was there, rumors said, that Lyra Voss resided, a mechanic whose brilliance with droids was said to be unmatched, and whose skill might restore Delta to full functionality. Jax had never met her, but he had bartered enough stolen intel to learn that she had a penchant for solving the unsolvable. Yet, if he thought the firefight on Vega Prime Station was the only headache he would endure, he was sorely mistaken. For Zyphos 9 posed challenges of an entirely different nature: paperwork, official stamps, endless lines, and stifling authority that demanded triple signatures in triplicate. There, smuggling an illegally modded droid with hidden military-grade software would be no small feat. Still, as the jump drives powered up and the starfield stretched into twisting lines of light, Jax harbored a quiet hope. He was free for the moment. The data core was in his possession, and Delta could still be repaired, or so he prayed. Whatever the next day held, Jax resolved that he would not cower from it. He would march straight into the quagmire of Zyphos 9, find Lyra Voss, and do whatever it took to bring Delta back. Little did he know, the path ahead would lead him not only into deeper conspiracies and tangles of red tape, but also to an entanglement of the heart, one that would push him far beyond his comfort zone and into a destiny he never dared imagine. Zyphos 9 sprawled in orbit around a yellow sun, its rotating rings lined with official offices, docking bays, and endless corridors of administration. From a distance, it resembled a colossal wedding cake of steel, each layer dedicated to a particular function: immigration, licensing, commerce, or the perplexing realm of interstellar tax law. The station's exterior glowed with harsh white illumination, the product of a newly installed power core rumored to overheat every second month. Jax exited hyperspace with a jolt, the swirling lines of jump space giving way to a panorama of arriving and departing ships. He guided the starfaring Phoenix toward a docking ring assigned by the station's automated control tower. Immediately, requests for identification began bombarding his console with excruciating formality. He frowned. Pilot Mercer, Jax, responding. He set into the comm, forging some official credentials under his breath. He typed furiously on a side console, bypassing outdated software. In mere moments, he had fooled the system into believing the Phoenix was a legitimate cargo vessel. A few minutes later, the docking clamps engaged, and Jax found himself stepping onto the scuffed floors of Bay E-33. Gone was the sense of gritty anarchy that pervaded Vega Prime. Instead, bland signage and bland walls formed the environment of Zyphos 9. The overhead lighting was harsh and clinical. The only graffiti was that of official notices pinned at every corner. He set foot on the platform, glancing around for any sign of enforcement or trouble. Instead, he spotted bored clerks scanning crates with dull eyes, checking them off on electronic clipboards. The entire bay had the feel of a government warehouse, where every item was meticulously cataloged and cross-referenced. Jax had stowed Delta in a large cargo trunk, carefully sealing the droid in a powered stasis container that would prevent external scans from detecting his unusual wiring. He had no intention of letting any official examine the droid's intricate systems. The data core, likewise, was hidden on Jax's person in a concealed pocket. Clearing his throat, Jax approached a surly woman seated behind a podium, her uniform starched to the point of absurdity. She barely looked up from her terminal. Name, ship registry, purpose of visit, she droned. Jax Mercer, starfaring Phoenix, minor hull repairs. Jax lied smoothly. I also have a droid that needs some routine maintenance. She typed his answers into the station's system with agonizing slowness. The seconds felt like minutes, the minutes like hours. Finally, she handed him a form. Fill this out, then proceed to customs in Quadrant A. Next, pay the docking fee at the kiosk in Quadrant B. After that, you'll receive a code to present at Window 14, Quadrant C. That'll get you a maintenance license, which you'll need to show to the repair yard. If everything checks out, you can see the licensed mechanic of your choice. Jax fought the urge to roll his eyes. Instead, he mustered a small smile, nodded, and took the form. Thanks, he said. She grunted in reply, already focused on the next bit of bureaucratic tedium on her screen. So it began, Jax's day of trudging from line to line, from Quadrant A to Quadrant B, from Window 14 to Kiosk 9, answering the same questions, paying the same fees, receiving an array of digital stamps that verified the official stamps that had come before them. At one point, Jax felt certain he had circled back upon the same corridor. Indeed, he recognized a flickering overhead light that made a buzzing noise. Still, after hours, he collected the final form allowing him to bring an anthropomorphic service unit into the station's deeper levels for repair. Jax let out a long exhale. He had endured many a chase, many a gunfight, but few experiences had tested his patience like Zyphos 9's labyrinth of regulations. At last, he stepped into a cramped elevator, punched in a code, and descended to what was labeled as the Independent Repair and Maintenance District. The doors opened to reveal a stark contrast from the floors above. Here, the corridors bustled with the clang of tools, the glow of welding torches, and the metallic stench of lubricants. Alien mechanics of every shape and size barked at one another across an open plaza where half-disassembled ships, droids, and hoverbikes were scattered about. Large neon signs advertised specialized services, fission engine tuning, cryo-sleep diagnostics, custom droid persona installation. Jax scanned for a sign of Lyra Voss's workshop. He had only half a rumor to guide him, that she operated out of a place called the Blue Circuit. He spotted a small, battered sign at the far end of the plaza with the words Blue Circuit scrawled in peeling neon paint. Approaching cautiously, he spied a half-open hangar where bits of mechanical detritus littered the floor. Hanging from the rafters were old starship parts. In the corner, a large contraption hissed with pressurized gas. Amid the jumble, there she was, Lyra Voss. She was tall, lithe, and blue-skinned. Her hair was pulled back in a practical tie, and her eyes shone with a deep bronze hue. She wore a grease-stained utility jumpsuit that bore the evidence of countless mechanical operations. She glanced up from the open chassis of a half-rebuilt repair droid, noticing Jax's presence. "You lost?" she asked, her tone clipped but not unkind. "I'm looking for Lyra Voss," Jax said, stepping closer. "You found her," she replied, wiping her hands on a rag. "You need something fixed?" Jax set down the trunk containing Delta. He studied Lyra's face for a moment, discerning the intelligence behind her eyes. "This droid is, special. I need someone with a certain level of expertise. Figured you might be the one." Lyra cocked her head. "Special how? Top-of-the-line AI, maybe some classified modules." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "He got hit with an EMP. Right now, he's offline." She let out a low whistle. "Military grade." Jax shrugged, avoiding a direct answer. "Are you up for the challenge?" A glint of curiosity lit her gaze. "I'll check him out, but if I see something suspicious, I'll have to report it. Station regs, you know." Jax inhaled slowly. "Let's just say I'll make it worth your while." For a moment, Lyra studied him, perhaps weighing whether to kick him out or see the job through. With a nod, she motioned him to bring the trunk inside. She led Jax past a low metal workbench to a corner where a diagnostics rig stood half-covered by tarps. With a flick of a switch, the rig came to life, monitors humming, ready to scan. Jax carefully unsealed the trunk, revealing Delta's inert figure. Lyra's brows rose. "Fancy design," she murmured, brushing her slender fingers across the metal plating. She connected a series of cables to access Delta's internal processor. A flurry of code scrolled across a monitor. Lyra's eyes widened. "This is more than fancy. This is some seriously advanced hardware. Are you telling me the truth about what you've brought me?" Jax pressed his lips together. "I'm telling you what you need to know to fix him." She tapped a few commands, and Delta's body twitched. His single optic flickered faintly. "Looks like the EMP fried some of his main circuits. I can repair the damage, but these deeper modules, it's all heavily encrypted. I might be able to bypass it, but it'll take time." A leaden weight of tension settled in Jax's chest. Time was not something they had in great supply. Sooner or later, the Nebula Syndicate would send trackers to retrieve the data core. Also, if station authorities caught wind of Delta's military-grade specs, the bureaucratic headache would turn into a nightmare. "How long?" Jax asked quietly. Lyra shrugged. "Could be a couple of days, could be a week. Hard to tell. I'll start by stabilizing his power systems so he can at least come online. Then we can see what we're dealing with." "Thanks," Jax said, offering a smile that carried genuine relief. Lyra nodded. She brushed a lock of hair back, regarding him with a steady gaze. "Don't thank me just yet. This might land both of us in a heap of red tape. I've never seen code quite like this." She gestured to a line of unfamiliar text on the screen. "And if it's something the station classifies as restricted tech, they'll bury us in forms and probably seize your droid." Jax swallowed hard. "Then we can't let that happen. Look, I'm good at forging docks, greasing palms, that sort of thing. Whatever it takes, I'll make sure we can do this under the radar." She regarded him again, as if reevaluating. "You sure you're up for that? Because I'm telling you, Zyphos 9 doesn't take kindly to unauthorized weaponized droids or anything close to it. Especially not now. We've had some push from high-ranking officials to crack down on anything that might be a threat." Jax exhaled. "I have no choice. Delta's more than a walking weapon. He's my friend, in his own weird way. And I need him functional." Lyra's expression softened. "All right, Mercer. Let's see what we can do." In that moment, as she bent over Delta's chassis and tapped away at diagnostic routines, Jax found himself oddly captivated by her. There was a quiet confidence in her posture, a brilliance in her eyes, a no-nonsense aura that was strangely reassuring. For all his wariness, and for all her bluntness, he couldn't deny an unexpected flicker of admiration. Little did he know that this was only the first step in an adventure that would test the limits of their resourcefulness and their hearts. 2 days passed in a blur of diagnostic checks and frantic attempts to sidestep station regulations. As Lyra worked tirelessly on Delta, she discovered more and more encrypted subroutines. Each new layer demanded a fresh wave of official forms to be filled out, if they wanted to remain above suspicion. "It's ridiculous," Lyra muttered, rummaging through a stack of data pads on her workbench. "They want me to fill out a Form 439, B if I modify a droid's speech module, but they also want a subsection 11, AI oversight waiver, if the droid's code meets certain thresholds. And that's just the start. Jax, leaning against a tool cabinet, surveyed the digital forms and updates streaming in. We can't do half of this if we're planning to stay under the radar. We'll raise all kinds of flags with the station's higher-ups. Maybe we should do it quietly. Lyra arched an eyebrow. Quietly? That's risky. If they catch us performing unauthorized modifications, you and I could end up in a detention block. He grimaced. I know, but we have to find a way, right? She huffed, then rubbed her temples. Let's think this through. Officially, if we were to overwhelm the system with the paperwork, we might slip some of the riskier modifications through. The clerks might just stamp everything without reading the fine print. Jax's lips quirked in a grin. You want to bury them in their own bureaucracy? Exactly. We submit the forms in the correct sequence, using the right codes and disclaimers. Every form cross-references the next in such a mind-numbing way that no one has the time or patience to sort it all out. By the time the backlog is cleared, we'll have finished the repairs. Jax ran a hand through his hair. It was a clever plan, though it sounded like a headache in its own right. All right, let's do it. They launched into the process, forging references to obscure directives, citing regulations from decades ago, and cross-referencing them with newly minted laws. Lyra's knowledge of station policy was invaluable, while Jax's flair for infiltration helped them slip subtle disclaimers into the forms. In the midst of all this madness, Delta's systems slowly began to revive. Lyra had managed to reroute power to his primary processor, and though he wasn't fully conscious yet, his optic glowed faintly. Late one evening, Jax and Lyra found themselves hunched over a terminal, half buried in red tape. Outside the workshop, other mechanics had long since closed up for the night, leaving only a few distant clangs echoing in the corridors. Jax groaned, leaning back. I've never seen so much official jargon in my life. Lyra eyed him with a soft chuckle. Zyphos, 9 prides itself on organization. But sometimes, that organization is downright oppressive. Yeah, Jax agreed. Makes me miss the chaos of Vega Prime, almost. She smiled, tapping a final command. All right, that's the last file for tonight. Tomorrow, I'll get the clearance from District Control, and we can push through the next round of approvals. Meanwhile, I'll keep working on Delta's systems. Jax studied her in the dim glow of the overhead lamp. Her skin had a soft luminescence in the shadows, and there was a resolute gleam in her eyes. He was grateful for her help, beyond mere necessity. She could have turned him away, called the authorities, or demanded a price far higher than any legitimate mechanic would. Instead, she was risking her own standing to help him. He cleared his throat. Thank you. For what? She asked, setting down a datapad. For not giving up, he said quietly. For giving Delta a chance. For giving me a chance. A subtle flush spread across her cheeks, though it was difficult to see against her blue complexion. She shrugged. I guess. I saw something in you, Mercer. Underneath that scoundrel facade, maybe there's a decent guy. You risked a lot to save your droid. That says something about your character. He offered a wry grin. Don't tell anyone. I've got a reputation to uphold. They laughed softly, and in that moment, the clang of metal and hum of machinery outside seemed to fade into the background. For a heartbeat, Jax felt an unexpected closeness with Lyra. He forced his gaze away, returning his focus to the inert shape of Delta on the work table. Tomorrow, we'll see if he wakes up, Lyra said. Tomorrow, Jax echoed, letting the word fill the air with both hope and uncertainty. Morning arrived with a flurry of new forms to sign, new stamps to authenticate, and new lines to stand in. Jax and Lyra parted ways briefly to handle different tasks. She to gather specialized parts from a friend's black market salvage yard, and he to finalize the labyrinthine paperwork that would hopefully keep station authorities off their back. When they regrouped at the Blue Circuit, they had enough components to proceed with the final phase of Delta's repairs. Lyra installed a new cluster of microprocessors into Delta's chassis, bridging gaps the EMP had torn in his neural network. Next, she ran a delicate calibration of his personality core. All set, she announced, flipping a master switch. At first, nothing happened. Then, Delta's optic flickered, cycling through a rainbow of colors before settling on a warm amber glow. His limbs twitched. His head turned slightly, as though taking in the workshop's surroundings. Jax leaned in, heart hammering. Delta? You all right, buddy? A crackle emerged from the droid's vocal speaker, followed by a burst of static that gradually resolved into coherent speech. Alas, Delta intoned in a trembling, mechanical voice. I awakened to find the stage anew, the script yet unwritten. Jax, can you hear me, my friend? Relief flooded Jax's chest. He grinned wide. Loud and clear. You had me worried. Delta rose unsteadily, supported by Lyra's guiding hand. Your concern warms my circuits. Though I feel as though I have drunk from Lethe's waters. My memory is hazy, a swirl of half-remembered lines. Please, fill the gap in my recollection. Jax patted Delta's shoulder. We got ambushed on Vega Prime Station. I had to hit you with an EMP to save us both. Sorry about that. Delta's optic dimmed momentarily, as if in introspection. I see. Tragic times call for tragic measures. Better an EMP in a friend's hands than 1,000 blasts from enemies. Lyra stepped forward, running a final diagnostic. He's stable, but there are hidden modules I can't fully decode. They're sealed behind some advanced encryption. If we push too far, we risk crashing the entire system again. Delta regarded her with curiosity. You must be Lyra Voss. I recall your name from the data logs. My gratitude, dear mechanic. You have snatched me from the jaws of oblivion. She smiled. I did my best. But keep your theatrics low when the station inspectors come around. We've had to bury the place in forms to keep you off their radar. Delta nodded gravely. Fear not. I shall speak only lines of the utmost normalcy. Then, under his breath, he murmured, though how drab that might be. Jax chuckled. Just keep it together for now, Delta. We've got bigger problems. The Nebula Syndicate is after the data core. At the mention of the data core, Delta's posture stiffened. A faint beep resounded from his chest cavity. My memory surfaces. Yes, we sought a stolen data core. May I see it? Jax removed the small cylinder from a pouch in his jacket. Here. Delta's optic brightened. If you will permit me, I can attempt to decode it, now that my systems are partially restored. Lyra bit her lip. Is that wise? We don't know what's inside that core. If it's booby-trapped with malicious code, it could fry your circuits again. Delta inclined his head politely. I accept the risk. My design includes a sandbox environment for external data infiltration. Once the data is uploaded, I can analyze it without letting it harm my primary processes. Or so I hope. Jax glanced at Lyra. She gave him a small nod of encouragement. Carefully, Jax handed the data core to Delta, who inserted it into a hidden slot in his metal torso. A sequence of flickers raced across Delta's optic, and he fell silent, immersing himself in the labyrinth of digital information. Minutes passed, heavy with tension. Finally, Delta spoke, his voice subdued. The data core holds detailed records of high-ranking officials, some on this station, who are in league with the Nebula Syndicate. Evidence of corruption, extortion, smuggling. Enough to bring them all down if properly exposed. Jax rubbed his jaw, a mixture of alarm and excitement stirring within him. That's why it's so valuable. The Syndicate must be blackmailing or controlling these officials. Lyra's eyes widened. This is bigger than I thought. If half of what you're saying is true, the entire top echelon of Zyphos 9 could be tainted. Delta nodded. And if the Syndicate is entangled with the powers that be, we're in grave danger simply possessing this data. They will come for us. A weighty silence loomed. Jax finally broke it. We can't just hide. We have to use this. Expose the Syndicate, or at least get them off our backs. But how? Lyra questioned, arms folded. We can't waltz up to the Central Authority and hand it over. Those guys might be part of the conspiracy. Jax pursed his lips. We need to find someone we can trust. Or we can orchestrate a public reveal so big they can't bury it. Delta waved a metal hand. May I propose a cunning plan? A heist, if you will. We could place the data inside the station's main broadcast system. If we manage to slip it into a mandatory public feed, every citizen of Zyphos 9 and beyond would witness the truths it contains all at once. Lyra let out a slow breath. That's bold. But infiltration of the central broadcast server would be nearly impossible. It's guarded by security measures more stringent than anything else here. Delta's optic glowed with a hint of excitement. We do not do things by half measures, dear Lyra. With your mechanical prowess, Jax's cunning, and my knack for infiltration, we could rewrite the script of their entire station. For a fleeting moment, we would be the puppet masters. A flicker of adrenaline coursed through Jax. He could see the shape of the plan forming. A risky gambit that might free them from the Syndicate's threat or land them in a prison cell for life. But perhaps it was their only chance. He placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. "We'll need your help to rig Delta's interface so he can plug into the broadcast server safely. Are you in?" She studied him, half in amazement. "You're crazy, you know that." "Yeah," Jax said with a roguish grin. "But I like to think I have style." She shook her head, though a smile tugged at her lips. "All right, Mercer. I'm in." And so the seeds of a daring plan were sown. A plan that would pit them against the station's corruption, the nebulous syndicate, and the mountain of officialdom that threatened to crush them at every turn. It took days of clandestine preparation to set their plan in motion. Lyra fine-tuned Delta's infiltration modules, forging special hardware that could slot into the station's core network. Meanwhile, Jax scouted the corridors leading to the central broadcast facility, memorizing guard rotations and security measures. They operated in the shadows, speaking in whispers whenever they ventured beyond the blue circuit. To keep up appearances, they continued to file trivial forms about droid maintenance and software updates. But behind the scenes, they prepared for a digital war. As their plan took shape, an unexpected closeness grew between Jax and Lyra. Late nights spent hunched over the same terminal, forging new infiltration codes or cross-referencing the station schematics, led to quiet conversations about their pasts, their dreams, their regrets. Lyra spoke of her early years as a prodigy on her home planet, tinkering with starship engines when she was barely tall enough to hold a spanner. She told him about the scholarship that brought her to Zyphos, 9, and how the station's rigid environment soon stifled her creativity. She stayed, she said, because she'd built a niche for herself that allowed her to do real good, helping folks who were otherwise crushed by the system. Jax, in turn, spoke of the corners of the galaxy he had traveled, the shady deals, the debts he owed to unsavory figures. He admitted that Delta was the closest thing he had to a friend, and how he'd never put that kind of trust in anyone before. One night, as they prepared a batch of code, their fingers nearly brushed over the same control. Jax felt a small jolt of warmth that had nothing to do with the console's glow. He looked at Lyra, and a moment passed between them, soft, unspoken, intimate. Then she turned away, clearing her throat, and the moment was gone. The day of the infiltration arrived all too soon. They had chosen a window when station security would be partially diverted, an official inspection of the lifeboat systems in Quadrant F. With the inspectors and many guards busy, the central broadcast facility would be less heavily manned, though still formidable. Jax and Delta led the approach, wearing official uniforms they had acquired through questionable means. Lyra trailed behind, carrying a crate of spare cables and components that would help them blend in as technicians. They passed through the labyrinth of corridors leading to the broadcast center's main doors. An imposing sentinel droid stood watch, scanning each person who approached. Jax handed over forged credentials, carefully crafted by Delta's infiltration suite. The sentinel droid paused, red optic flickering as it verified them. Tension knotted in Jax's stomach. Then the droid nodded, stepping aside. They were in. Inside, the central broadcast control room was a marvel of blinking consoles and swirling holographic displays. A massive central column pulsed with data streaming in from across Zyphos, 9, routing it to official channels, commerce bulletins, public announcements, and more. They had only minutes before someone questioned their presence. Jax gestured for Delta to move swiftly to the server hub. Meanwhile, Lyra feigned adjusting the monitor calibrations, muttering about signal distortion. Delta plugged a specialized device, Lyra's custom handiwork, into a hidden port behind the main terminal. He tapped a series of controls, initiating the upload of the damning data. On the overhead display, lines of code poured forth, and Jax could see references to bribery, smuggling rings, falsified shipping logs, extortion notes, and secret deals with the Nebula Syndicate. A beep echoed from the server. The infiltration was underway, unstoppable unless someone physically severed the link. Delta's optic brightened. But trouble arrived in the form of security personnel bursting through a side entrance. "Hey, you there," a guard shouted. "What are you doing?" Lyra froze, Jax spun around, and Delta continued to focus on the final stage of the upload. The guard leveled his blaster, suspicion etched on his features. Jax raised his hands and feigned surrender. Easy, pal. We're just recalibrating. We got the order from. Don't move, the guard barked, stepping closer. Another guard emerged beside him, blaster raised. Lyra cast a frantic look at Delta, who was still interfacing with the server. Time was running out. In a burst of movement, Jax lunged, knocking one guard's weapon aside. The shot ricocheted off a console, showering sparks. Lyra ducked, tackling the other guard with surprising agility. For a brief, chaotic moment, fists, elbows, and curses flew. Delta, oblivious to the scuffle, recited lines from Hamlet. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Delta, Jax shouted, grappling with a guard. Wrap it up. Delta's amber optic flashed. Upload complete. With that, he disconnected from the server. As Jax dispatched the guard with a well-placed punch, Delta swiveled around, brandishing a small stun emitter that flickered in his palm. The last conscious guard dropped in a twitching heap. Alarms wailed. More footsteps pounded in the corridor. Jax exchanged a wide-eyed look with Lyra. We gotta go now. Clutching the device and data core, Delta followed them in a mad dash toward a side exit. They raced down a corridor of blinking emergency lights, narrowly avoiding squads of station police responding to the breach. Jax fired a few shots to deter pursuit, but the security presence was increasing at every junction. Which way? Lyra gasped as they paused at a cross-section. This way. Jax panted, pointing left. There's a cargo lift that leads near a docking bay. They sprinted, hearts hammering in unison. Around one corner, they stumbled upon a group of uniformed officials brandishing stun batons. But Lyra, with a flash of brilliance, hurled a small device that unleashed a swarm of mechanical fireflies, disorienting illusions that danced in the corridor. The officials reeled, momentarily distracted, and the trio slipped past. At last, they reached the cargo lift. Jax slammed a button, and the door slid open. Once inside, he hit the down arrow, sending them plummeting toward the lower levels. Delta's optic flickered with excitement. The data is in the main server. Within minutes, it will broadcast across the station's public networks, unstoppable as the tide. Lyra let out a shaky laugh, leaning on Jax for support. We did it. We actually did it. Jax exhaled, relief mingling with a thrilling sense of triumph. We've just painted a target on our backs bigger than the entire station. Let them come, Delta declared with Shakespearean flourish. For we have truth as our shield, and justice as our sword. Yeah, we'll see how that holds up against actual blaster fire, Jax muttered with a grin. The lift doors opened, and they stepped into the shadows of the loading bay. Sirens echoed from above, and the station's comm system crackled with urgent calls for security to converge on the broadcast center. Jax led them through a maze of crates, heading for a small exit that would lead back to the blue circuit. They needed to regroup, gather supplies, and plot their escape. But a sense of victory sang in his veins. For once, the truth was on their side, blasted out to thousands of data terminals across Zyphos 9. As they neared the exit, a voice crackled from overhead speakers, the official public broadcast channel. To Jax's satisfaction, the voice was frantic, describing the suspicious data dump that had just been circulated to all citizen consoles. Mentions of high-ranking officials and alleged corruption soared through the station's comm channels. The station was in uproar. Jax looked to Lyra, who locked eyes with him. In that silent exchange, they both realized that their actions had sparked a revolution of sorts, perhaps a small one, perhaps temporary, but enough to rock the station's foundations. They slipped away into the gloom, uncertain of what would come next but buoyed by the success of their plan. For the next day, Zyphos 9 was in chaos. Public outcry erupted as the data exposed bribes, extortion, and black market dealings implicating not only random bureaucrats but members of the station's upper echelon. Some officials resigned immediately, while others barricaded themselves in their offices, denying any wrongdoing. Citizens flooded the corridors with protest signs, chanting slogans Jax had never imagined hearing in a place so drowned in paperwork. Security was stretched thin, uncertain whom to obey. Some of their commanding officers were implicated in the scandal. At the blue circuit, Jax, Lyra, and Delta hunkered down, monitoring the swirl of events from a series of makeshift screens. Jax had half expected an immediate raid, But the station's authorities were too busy tearing themselves apart to focus on a single droid mechanic's shop. That changed soon enough. During the next night cycle, a group of heavily armed Nebula Syndicate enforcers stormed into the district, presumably searching for the Data Core's thieves. Jax and Lyra were forced to slip into the workshop's hidden crawlspace with Delta, hearts pounding, as the enforcers ransacked the main floor. Fortunately, the trio remained undetected. Lyra's forward thinking had installed shielded compartments to hide sensitive equipment. But the message was clear. The Syndicate wanted blood, or at least retribution. "We have to leave," Jax whispered, once the enforcers were gone. "There's no way we can hide here forever." Lyra frowned, looking around at her beloved workshop. "If we go, I lose everything. My business, my life's work. But staying, it's not safe anymore." Delta touched her arm gently. "Alas, sometimes to save something, we must let it go. This station is a sinking ship of corruption, and you deserve to be free of it." She sighed, face etched with sorrow. "Maybe you're right. Once the dust settles, I can see if there's anything left for me here." By morning, a new plan took shape. They would escape the station on Jax's ship, the Starfaring Phoenix. But first, they had to retrieve the starship itself from Bay E-33, and that bay was now crawling with heightened security, thanks to the revelations that had turned the station upside down. To make matters more complicated, Lyra needed to finalize a key piece of documentation. Unbeknownst to them, the flurry of forms they had submitted to legitimize Delta's repairs had triggered a bizarre chain reaction in the station's bureaucracy. "The system wants a final signature," Lyra explained, scanning a data pad. "Something about verifying that all modules have been installed in compliance with official guidelines, or else they won't release your ship from impound." Jax's jaw dropped. "My ship's impounded." She passed him the data pad, showing the official notice. "They're claiming you still owe them some fee for these upgrades. Normally, you'd need a month to pay, but they've flagged you for immediate settlement. Probably because you drew so much attention." With mounting frustration, Jax read the lines of the notice. "This is insane. They're basically saying I can't leave the station without finalizing all this bureaucratic nonsense." Lyra huffed. "We can stage a heist for the data, but apparently we're stuck in more red tape? Unbelievable." Delta gave a small tilt of the head. "Such is the comedic turn of fate. Our mightiest foes are not only the Syndicate's goons, but also the labyrinth of forms." Jax let out a groan. "So how do we fix this? We can't afford the time to do it legitimately." Lyra tapped a few commands, analyzing the station's new edicts. "Well, ironically, we might be able to finalize it all if we fill out a simple, consolidated application for interpersonal asset melding, which is a ridiculously complicated name for a combined property registration. If it goes through, it might automatically unlock your ship, among other things." He gave a puzzled frown. "Wait, are you saying we apply for some property melding, like we're merging businesses or something? That's wild." She rubbed her neck. "It's not common, but yes, the system lumps lots of bureaucratic approvals under that category, letting individuals pool property or assets." "Fine," Jax said. "Let's do that. Then we can get out of here." Delta opened a station terminal, forging any further signatures or codes they might need. While Lyra and Jax double-checked the forms for the property meld, Delta quietly input details. Then they hit submit. "Well, that's done," Jax sighed. "Let's hope it unlocks the ship soon." Lyra quirked a half-smile. "We'll see." Fate, however, has a sense of humor, and bureaucratic systems, even more so. When they arrived at Bay E-33, official documents in hand, they found a stoic clerk waiting next to the Starfaring Phoenix. This clerk wore a new type of uniform, indicating some special rank in the administrative hierarchy. She held a data pad and beckoned them closer. "Congratulations," she said in a monotone voice. "Your consolidated application for interpersonal asset melding has been approved. I have the final license right here, indicating the unification of assets between Jax Mercer and Lyra Voss." Jax shot Lyra a surprised glance. "Unification of assets? That's good, I guess. Under the Interpersonal Asset Melding Act, your union is legally recognized on Zyphos 9 as a conjugal partnership," the clerk continued. "Henceforth, you are considered spouses in the eyes of station law." A stunned silence fell. Jax nearly dropped the forms. "Spouses?" Lyra blinked, color flooding her cheeks. There must be some mistake. We didn't apply for that. We just wanted a property merge. The clerk cut her off with a bored wave of her hand. Section 7, Clause 3 states that all individuals merging personal assets under these conditions are automatically considered legally wed. Congratulations. For a moment, Jax and Lyra stared at each other, thunderstruck. Delta let out a delighted metallic chuckle. Verily, what a twist. Jax's brain spun. On one hand, they had inadvertently married themselves on Zyphos 9. On the other hand, the clerk's confirmation indicated that the station must now release the starfaring Phoenix from impound. The clerk tapped her datapad. Your joint property is now recognized, meaning your ship is authorized for departure. Sign here. Without a word, Jax scrawled his signature, feeling absurdly self-conscious. Lyra did the same, practically avoiding his gaze. The clerk nodded, satisfied, and waved them away. Enjoy your conjugal partnership, she said, her tone entirely unenthusiastic. Next, with that, the starfaring Phoenix was once again Jax's to command, except, apparently, it also belonged to Lyra under station law. Once they were inside the ship, the cargo ramp closed, and the engines hummed to life. Jax and Lyra found themselves alone in the cockpit as Delta fiddled with the co-pilot's console. An awkward silence settled upon them. Look, Jax finally said, clearing his throat. I know we didn't plan this, but, I guess we're married now, on Zyphos 9 anyway. That probably doesn't matter once we leave, right? Lyra's lips parted in a strained attempt at a laugh. Yeah, probably not recognized anywhere else, but wow, that was unexpected. Despite the gravity of their situation, an irrepressible smile tugged at Jax's mouth. I suppose there are worse ways to get out of impound. She shook her head, though amusement shone in her eyes. We'll sort out the details later. Right now, we need to get off this station before the syndicate or station police come after us. Jax nodded. Right. Let's worry about escaping first, then we can figure out how to, handle our new legal status. They shared a brief, tense smile, then focused on the controls. With Delta's assistance, Jax requested clearance to depart. This time, there was no bureaucratic blockade. The station's system recognized their conjugal partnership and asset license, providing a swift green light. The starfaring Phoenix lifted off, thrusters glowing beneath the hull. As they guided the ship out of Bay E-33, the station's proximity sensors scanned them, but no alarms were raised. The chaos from the data leaks still raged, occupying official attention. Moments later, they soared away from Zyphos 9, leaving behind a swirl of scandal, protests, and newly exposed corruption. In their wake, the station reeled from the revelations, and the nebulous syndicate's influence was under intense scrutiny. For the first time in years, perhaps, Zyphos 9 had a chance to rebuild on a foundation of truth, however messy that truth might be. The star-swept void welcomed the starfaring Phoenix with a quiet beauty. Free from the claustrophobic corridors of Zyphos 9, Jax felt a burden lift from his shoulders. He set a course toward open space, uncertain of their next destination, but reveling in the sense of possibility. Delta stood by the co-pilot station, scanning the ship's systems. Engines stable, hull integrity at 95%, and the data core, though now fully transmitted, remains in my memory banks for future reference. Good, Jax said, glancing back at Lyra, who lingered near the navigation panel. Any idea where you want to go? She folded her arms, gazing out at the stars. I'm not sure. I never really thought about leaving Zyphos 9 for good. But after everything that's happened, she paused, meeting his gaze with a shy smile. Maybe it's time for a fresh start. We did good there, exposing the syndicate. Maybe we can do some more good out here. A sense of warmth spread through Jax, accompanied by the faint memory of that bureaucratic fiasco that bound them in a conjugal partnership. He didn't know what that meant for them long-term, but he felt an undeniable pull toward her. In the chaos of infiltration and sabotage, they had forged a partnership that went beyond convenience. Perhaps it was madness, or perhaps fate. Delta observed them, his optic flickering. Might I suggest we set a course for a star cluster known for its scenic asteroid belts? I've heard rumor that pirates lurk there, and you, my dear Jax, always love a good skirmish. Jax snorted. One thing at a time, Delta. We probably need to lay low for a while, let things settle. Then we can decide if we want to tangle with pirates or find a new job somewhere. Lyra's smile blossomed, small but real. Either way, I'm in. If you'll have me. Jax couldn't help but grin back. Welcome aboard, partner. A comfortable silence settled. Then Delta, in typical dramatic fashion, cleared his vocal emitter. A final quote, if I may. Our revels now are ended. These our actors, were all spirits, and are melted into air, into thin air. Jax rolled his eyes with a smirk. You're not implying the story is over already, are you? Delta's metal faceplate seemed to twist in a gesture akin to a smile. Nay, dear Jax, the real story has only just begun. And so, with the hum of the engines and the sparkle of distant suns guiding them onward, the starfaring Phoenix drifted deeper into the cosmic frontier. Pirates, conspiracies, and the unknown wonders of the galaxy awaited. But, at least for this moment, Jax Mercer could breathe freely, knowing that he wasn't facing the stars alone. He had Delta, his boisterous droid friend, reactivated and upgraded. He had Lyra Voss, the brilliant mechanic who had challenged him, helped him, and, through a fluke of paperwork, become his accidental wife under station law. And, thanks to the chaotic trail they left behind, they had perhaps changed Zyphos, 9 for the better. In a galaxy rife with corruption and cold frontiers, it was no small feat to claim a measure of freedom, and maybe even a bit of happiness. Their next adventure might be just around the corner, but for now, they were together, charting their own course among the stars. Happy ending. Though danger lingered in the form of the Nebula Syndicate, surely vowing vengeance for their exposure, and though the complexities of Jax and Lyra's newfound marriage were far from resolved, a subtle joy filled the cockpit of the starfaring Phoenix. They had wrested themselves from the clutches of pirates, corruption, and mind-numbing bureaucracy, emerging not broken but strangely whole. Even Delta, with his penchant for high drama, seemed quieter, as though savoring the calm after the storm. Occasionally, he would break the hush with a line from Shakespeare, and Jax would roll his eyes, while Lyra suppressed a laugh. They had survived, they had triumphed, and they had each other, a small but resilient team, forging a path across the galaxy where duty, daring, and even love might entwine in the face of whatever came next. And for now, that was enough. A happy ending, at least for this chapter of their story, wrapped in the infinite promise of the cosmos.